guy, traveled to his house. The guy brought weapons. All of this was preparatory for the offense. And of course, he pled guilty for that. The defense lawyers got what they asked for. Filings for a 30-year sentence would be too harsh. They asked for 8 years, followed by 25 years of supervised release. Wow. So the judge didn't even split it. Judge is like, well, aren't the Democrat women offended by having dudes who are attempted assassins now just take their label over them and get like reduced sentences, kind of exploiting your gender? I don't know. Strange behavior. Kavanaugh's attempted assassin got a very weak sentence, and the DOJ is not happy about that. Of course, this dude has now become a woman, allegedly, according to his own mind and maybe the judge, and is now getting a mitigated penalty. And so Pam Bondi is saying, we're not going to let that stand. This is ridiculous. We will be appealing the woefully insufficient sentence imposed by the district court, which does not reflect the horrific facts of this case, saying this was an attempted assassination of a Supreme Court judge called Brett Kavanaugh with a disgusting attack against our entire political system by a profoundly disturbed individual. And we've talked about this case many times. The case landed up in this woman's court. Her name is Deborah Boardman. She was recently appointed by Joe Biden, of course, and she was a law clerk in the Eastern District of Virginia, public defender at one point, and now is issuing sentences of 8 years. And so the DOJ is not happy about it. Bloomberg explained what went down at the sentencing hearing. So they had somebody in the room. Of course, this is federal court, so we don't get to see or hear anything in most of these cases. But here's what they were reporting. Why did this dude, when the DOJ asked for a minimum of 30 years for an attempted assassination, remember, he came out and actually called the cops, to his credit, or his sister, and his sister said, you better call the cops before you go in there and try to shoot somebody. But he showed up, and man, he was researching this. The facts were egregious. He was thinking about it, planning, plotting it. He actually wanted to go take out multiple Supreme Court justices. He said this was just his first really, attempt. And fortunately, by the grace of God, something happened. There was some intervention, divine or otherwise, and he didn't do it. But he was outside the house with weapons and actually ended up turning himself in. So the DOJ came back out and they said, how about 30 years for that, right? It's 30 years. He'll spend, a bunch of time in prison, but he'll get out. And the district judge said, no, actually, that's not going to work. The dude's name is Nicholas Rossi, okay? But he changed it to Sophie. His legal name is called Nicholas John Rossi, and he pleaded guilty. These articles are just so ridiculous. This dude pleaded guilty to attempted assassination, okay? And when you take a guilty plea like that, like, first of all, he was dead to rights. I mean, the facts were there. He called in, he admitted it, talked to them afterwards, explained everything. So a trial's not going to be a good, idea. So the fact that he pleaded guilty, you would say, well, what is the appropriate penalty? Sometimes as part of a plea deal, you'll have a defined sentence. They did not do that here. So it's kind of an open range. So the DOJ then came out and said, we want 30 years. The judge came back down and said, how about 8? Now, this is what the judge said. Supervised release, lifetime. He says, what Sophie Rossi did, said this judge, said during the sentencing, devising and nearly executing a plan to kill a Supreme Court justice in an attempt to change a Supreme Court ruling and the composition of the court. It was a political terrorist attempt to try to not only scare judges into compliance, but also so that the Democrats could appoint more judges, is absolutely reprehensible and will be punished, but only for 8 years. Boardman noted that threats against federal judges appear to be on the rise, but the judge said, well, this dude called the police and confessed his plan to kill the judge, saying he wouldn't have even been charged if he didn't do that. So like if he hadn't called and turned himself in, I guess if he just went down to a Dairy Queen or something, right, and just called the whole thing off, he wouldn't have been charged. That's true. But he was about to do it. And his sister basically intervened and he called the cops to prevent him from doing it because he had these compulsions and urges. And I don't know if he was on hormones or whatever he was doing back then, but they stopped him from doing it. There was intervention that basically stopped him from doing it. It's not like he was contemplating it in his brain and didn't take steps in furtherance of. The guy, traveled to his house. The guy brought weapons. All of this was preparatory for the offense. And of course, he pled guilty for that. But she says, during the sentencing that lasted nearly a full day, so just indulging in this, you're so beautiful, Sophie, you look so great. Boardman, the judge, raised concerns about the conditions that this dude would face in federal prison as a trans, and the mental health treatment that he would receive. Yeah. She writes, she told the prosecutor, Corrine Mao, she said, the judge, well, we know about the very significant shortcomings in the Bureau of Prisons when it comes to treating mentally ill prisoners. She calling the trans mentally ill? Wait a minute, what? The judge also raised that Trump's executive order this year, requiring that inmates be incarcerated with facilities that align with their actual gender, is concerning to her. So the judge deliberated for over an hour following both presentations, 2 hours going over other factors that she cared about. Bondi said, this is ridiculous. ridiculous. We're going to appeal this. And in a separate case, some other woman got 5 years for threatening another judge. Federal judges have received unsolicited pizza deliveries to their homes and more. The DOJ wanted a much higher sentence. They said this was entirely premeditated. It was months of planning and preparations. He went across and got guns, traveled across country, and more. And you need to send a sentence down so that you can't just basically prepare to attempt to assassinate judges and then take steps in furtherance of that act. Boardman said she wouldn't fully enact the terrorism enhancement, but wouldn't fully disregard it either. The defense lawyers got what they asked for. Filings for a 30-year sentence would be too harsh. They asked for 8 years, followed by 25 years of supervised release. Wow. So the judge didn't even split it. So often what'll happen will be like the judge, DOJ comes in, they want 30 years. The defense wants 8. I'm surprised they even asked for that. 8's, they're like, well, if we ask for like 5 or 4, it's gonna look ridiculous. If we ask for 10, that's a little bit too aggressive. So like, let's just ask for 8. So sometimes the judge will split it, right? Well, 8 sounds pretty lenient there, defense attorneys. If this was a white dude who was not transitioning, this was a J6 defendant who got into a scuffle, a lot longer than that. Or if it was a seditious conspirator, like one of the Proud Boys or the Oath Keepers, remember that? They weren't even there. Enrique Tarrio and Stuart Rhodes were not even there on January 6th. They got 20-year plus sentences. They weren't even there because they were like planning and plotting. Remember that crap? Planning or plotting, talking to other people about it, whatever. They had these fake, reports, these fake documents that some feds dropped in their chats. And they're like, well, somebody posted a PDF that said that you're going to organize. We're like, okay, great. Who was it? Was it Stuart Rhodes? No. Was it Enrique Tarrio? No. But they planned for something and they got 20 plus years. Okay. This dude planned, got 8 years. His attorneys urged the judge to consider, well, he voluntarily abandoned it. Yeah, kind of. I mean, he was kind of talked into it. His sister called, then he called the authorities and surrendered. He's got a history of mental illness. Yeah. And we can see that on display, but they enable some of it, right? Like mental illness, it's really weird how this works. Mental illness is what caused him to almost assassinate a judge. That was mental illness, but his transition from a dude into a woman and his rebranding from Nicholas to Sophie is totally normal and his brain's great. That's all like accepted by society. It's weird how they can separate the two out, isn't it? While prosecutors painted his decision not to enter the home was because he had security there, the defense said no, it was a crisis of conscience. According to the prosecution, he was actually dissuaded because there were armed individuals outside of Kavanaugh's house. So they came out. He's deeply remorseful, sorry to be a part of this political violence. Marshals spotted this dude right outside around 1 a.m. June 2022. Rossi called the emergency line, reported suicidal and homicidal thoughts, and then just transitioned into a woman. And the judge is like, well, aren't the Democrat women offended by having dudes who are attempted assassins now just take their label over them and get like reduced sentences, kind of exploiting your gender? I don't know. Strange behavior, but the judge bought it for whatever reason. It's really a good strategy. You can just transition and you can knock off, like 22 years. Off your sentence? What an insane country this is. All right, so here was more. We saw Todd Blanche responded to this too. He says, this sentence was substantively unreasonable. An assassination plot against the Supreme Court justice strikes at the heart of our republic and our democracy. Remember, if you're a Democrat, this is the end of our democracy. So you need 25 years for planning for something, right? Like this Stuart Rhodes got. As AG Bondi stated, we will appeal to correct this miscarriage of justice and we will defend the rule of law. And so DOJ, not happy about it. Obviously, it feels like it's a massive double standard. And if this dude was a MAGA supporter and wasn't transitioning into Sophie, then you would see a lot bigger penalty here, courtesy of this judge, Judge Deb, courtesy of Joe Biden. Just took the bench in 2021 and graduated from the University of Virginia. Very curious. All right, so we'll keep our eye on this one. We'll see what the appeal says. Maybe he'll be going to prison for a lot longer, or maybe the courts of appeals will say, we have to show some sympathy for Sophie. We'll keep our eye on it. Thanks for joining us as we do.